Hello there, friends and neighbors. Thanks so much for coming back to my channel. This is me, Stella Hendricks, and today we are going to read this People Weekly article from 1989, talking a little bit more about I call it the Dorothy Stratten story, but at this point it's not Dorothy's story anymore, it's Louise's. Louise is also independent of Dorothy, one of my starlets and harlots, and her story is really poignant to me because she so frequently ends up being a secondary character in everybody else's story, and I feel like she really had to fight to make her own life hers. I love sisters. I have wonderful sisters myself, mostly. And big sisters can be such a great comfort, and it seems like Louise and Dorothy were very close to each other. But then after she died, Dorothy probably cast a massive shadow that would have been really difficult for Louise to get herself out from under. And then later, you will read this story and you'll see what I mean. So I try to remember to keep Louise and Dorothy as very separate characters and try to tell them as, Dorothy's story, it ends when Dorothy dies. Louise is alive still. Louise, her story is ongoing. So I would hate to feel like a permanent secondary character to my sister's story, even if it was a sister who I loved and adored and worshipped, as I very much do my older sister. I think in a similar way that Louise did to Dorothy, although the age difference is much bigger, and so, oh my gosh, I feel so bad for Louise. Anyway, we're reading this story, The Passions of Peter Bogdanovich, because I feel like I need to explain a little bit why I am so hostile against Peter Bogdanovich. Oh, also, do you like my jacket? I made this jacket. Isn't it fabulous and very rock and roll? Oh, it's my fave. On the back it says, "Come party with me." Yay! I made this and I'm very proud, so I had to show it off. Anyway, I also made the one in the last video too that I forgot to show everyone. Although now I'm getting so hot, I don't think I can wear this. You see, it's very soft, and I lined it with like faux fur, but I live in Florida and now I'm questioning some of my decision-making processes, but that's okay. The Passions of Peter Bogdanovich, further explaining why Stella kind of hates this guy a lot. You'll run into this as I talk about Dorothy and Louise. So, first I'll show you the pictures. I love this one. She was, director Peter Bogdanovich would admit, an obsession. Blonde, delicately featured, a Playboy Playmate of the Year, Dorothy Stratten was so beautiful she seemed luminescent, as if lit from within. A year after he first met her in 1978, when she was 18, Bogdanovich cast her in a movie, and though she was married, they soon became lovers. "I could hardly believe that she really existed, that she wasn't a dream," he later said of their affair. "There was something miraculous about Dorothy Stratten." In just 5 months, however, the director's dream became a nightmare. Dorothy's estranged husband, crazed by her decision to leave him and marry Bogdanovich, indecently assaulted her, killed her with a point-blank shotgun blast to the head, and then killed himself. Her murder left Bogdanovich desolate, devastated. "I haven't been dating," he said 16 months after Dorothy's murder. "I'm a widower. I don't know if I can ever love as totally and completely as I loved Dorothy." He gave up making movies to write a book about her death, and he became devoted to Dorothy's mother, Nellie, and her 12-year-old kid sister, Louise. Too devoted, some said. He sent Louise, an insecure, pudgy girl with none of her sister's delicate features, to a private school and to modeling classes. He bought her a baby grand piano and took her along on trips to Paris and Hawaii. He gave her a gold and diamond necklace, and when she graduated from high school, a Pontiac Trans Am. In 1986, he gave her a movie role. 2 weeks later, Bogdanovich married Louise, now 20, the same age that Dorothy was when Dorothy died, in a small ceremony in Vancouver, renewing speculation about just when his interest in the girl became more than that of a close family friend, and just about what it had become. Skeptics suggested that Louise's motivation had a practical side. Her marriage to Bogdanovich would solve a chronic problem she had coming from her native Canada to work in the States. Those who know the couple discounted that and saw in the relationship an eerie reprise of the director's intense love for Louise's sister, Dorothy. When allegations of a romantic attachment between Bogdanovich and Louise first surfaced in 1984 when she was 16, that's not a romantic relationship, friends and neighbors. That is called a predatory sexual exploitation relationship, not romantic. Get it right, 1980s. Thank you. They were silenced by a slander suit by Louise and her mother. The suit was later dropped. Some of those who know Bogdanovich best express little surprise at the marriage. Polly Platt, Bogdanovich's first wife and mother of his 2 daughters, who were friendly with Louise during her frequent sojourns in LA, says the pair has been together for a long time. But Louise's mother, hearing of this marriage at her home in Vancouver, was distraught. "I feel he wants her because of a guilt trip," she said. "This happened to my other daughter, who got her head shot off, and it's gonna happen to this one. He didn't do it, but he was involved. If he is in love with one daughter, how can he be in love with the other daughter?" The answer to that question may lie in Hollywood's particular tendency to mix fact and fantasy. Bogdanovich has long been known for blurring his professional and personal lives. Hef does that too. I think it's shady. You should not do that. He fell in love with his leading ladies and tried to make his lovers into stars. He had been married for 7 years to screenwriter and producer Polly Platt. Oh yeah, that's his first wife. The wife who keeps implying heavily that this relationship has been going on for a long time. You want to know what movie she's most famous for producing? Why, a lovely little film called Pretty Baby, which is a movie about a child prostitute being groomed by a creepy older guy and how that's completely fine and romantic. What? Yeah, these are the people we're dealing with right now, friends. Fun. Producer Polly Platt of Pretty Baby, when he saw Sybil Shepherd's picture on the cover of Glamour. Sybil was 20 when Bogdanovich cast her in the Last Picture Show. That number keeps coming up. Sybil, 20. Dorothy, 20. Louise, 20. He soon left Polly and his 2 young daughters, Antonia and Alexandra, then toddlers, to move in with Shepherd. What a class act. But their next 2 projects together, Daisy Miller and At Long Last Love, convinced critics that the talented Bogdanovich was blinded by love. Shepherd was miscast, the movies were leaden, and both their careers were set back by the liaison. In 1978, Shepherd and Bogdanovich broke up. About that time, Dorothy Stratten, whose sweet temper belied a difficult childhood in Vancouver, was taking her first steps towards Hollywood. Her mother, Nellie Hoag Stratten, had been twice married and divorced and often had to rely on welfare while raising her 3 children. John, the second child, was 1 year younger than Dorothy, and Louise, the baby, was the product of a second marriage. Nellie trained as a practical nurse, but decent paying jobs were scarce. When I met Nellie in 1975, we were both single mothers trying to raise our children on very little money, recalls close friend Christine Fisher-Konders, whose daughter Julie was about the same age as Louise. They were living in a tiny little postage stamp of a house near an amusement park in Vancouver. It was a harsh environment. Dorothy was a beautiful girl, and her personality was even nicer. Nellie was worried that Dorothy was going down to Hollywood, but Dorothy kept telling her she was okay. Still, Dorothy's friends were concerned about her association with Paul Snyder, a small-time local photographer whose burning ambition was to crack Playboy. He wasn't really a photographer. He was like an event planner, and he was a well-known pimp. He cultivated the title for himself of the Jewish pimp up in Vancouver. So I don't know why they're just making him like a photographer. Maybe it's to help people understand how he got the pictures into Playboy and stuff, but Paul Snyder was not a photographer. He was a hustler and a cheap pimp. Bullied Dorothy, then working at a Dairy Queen, into posing for nude photographs. He peddled them to the magazine, then took his prize to LA in the summer of 1978. The next year, he persuaded Dorothy to marry him. Shortly afterward, she was selected as Playmate of the Year. Around that same time, Bogdanovich ran into Stratten. Let's look at some pictures. Ah, boo. Fuck him. For the second time at the Playboy Mansion. Smitten by her beauty, he struck up a conversation and then soon got in touch again to offer her a small role in his new movie, They All Laughed. By the summer of 1980, she had moved into the director's Bel Air home. Earlier in their romance, Bogdanovich presented Dorothy with a little unicorn pin because, he said, her purity and grace reminded him of that mythical creature. Dorothy began collecting unicorns. In May 1980, she went home for her mother's third marriage to Burl Eldridge. Elizabeth Norris, director of communications for Playboy Enterprises, went along and was struck by the way that 12-year-old Louise absolutely worshipped Dorothy, and Dorothy adored her little sister. She noticed something else. At the wedding reception, Louise sat on Burl's lap and held his hand for most of the time. I felt that she was a little girl who had never had a father figure and was desperate for one. In fact, they were all hungry for attention, all vulnerable. Louise, Dorothy, Nellie. Later that summer, Louise, who was about the same age as Bogdanovich's daughters, went to Hollywood to visit her sister. Her letters to a friend back home were excited, if full of misspellings. Went to the Mojave Desert. While we were down there, saw 10 rattlesnakes, 10 jackrabbits. I have a great tan, and at Dorothy's place have my own room, push-button telephone, bathroom, pool, and movie projector. On August 14, 1980, Stratten failed to return from a meeting with her estranged husband. Police later determined that Snyder had put Dorothy, he indecently assaulted her before killing her with a 12-gauge shotgun. He then turned the gun on himself. Good. I don't feel bad for him. Bogdanovich got the news that evening from Hugh Hefner. I screamed, he wrote in his book. On the floor, I curled into a ball. He could not face telling Louise. He told her Dorothy had to go to New York on a business trip and Louise would have to go home to Vancouver, says her friend Julie Fisher. She didn't know what was going on. Then one day she asked me, why can't we watch television? Why can't we go out like we used to? I asked her, do you want the truth or a lie? Then I told her, Paul killed Dorothy. She stayed in her mom's bedroom for 2 days. Dorothy and Louise were so close. It hurt a lot. So... is that the Julie? That's the Julie who's like her own age. So none of the adults in her life even told her that Dorothy was dead or taught her how to deal with that kind of grief. Another one of her playmates told her that. So there are so many disappointing adults in this story. Wow. At the Banting Junior High School, where Louise was entering 8th grade, a friend said she was stared at like a freak. Ravaged by grief, Nellie refused to talk about the murder with anyone, even her daughter. We could always tell when Nellie had been in Louise's room because of all the pictures of Dorothy would be turned face down on the tables, says Julie. She didn't have any around the rest of the home either. There were other family problems as well. According to Christine Ken Kunders, Brother John had entered into a disastrous marriage with a woman later convicted of robbery. Eldridge's 2 sons were giving Nellie trouble. Burl was rarely at home, and Nellie's marriage was failing. In such an environment, Bogdanovich's invitation to Nellie and Louise to come live with him and help him with the book he was writing on Dorothy must have come as a gift. Why he made the invitation is less clear. Did he feel guilty because his romance with Dorothy had, at least indirectly, provoked her murder? Do you remember that there was a rumor that he was having an affair at that time with the mom, with Nellie? Burl, the husband, said that. Who knows if he's telling true stories or not, but I remember someone said it. Okay. In such an environment, Bogdanovich's invitation to Nellie and Louise came to come and live with him and help him write the book he was writing on Dorothy must have come as a gift. Why did he make it? Did he feel the need to mourn Dorothy with the people who loved her best? At the very least, as Polly Platt would later say, he felt he needed to take care of Dorothy's sister. As early as the fall of 1980, Playboy's Elizabeth Norris, who stopped in to see the family on a trip to Vancouver, noted that Bogdanovich had a telephone installed in Louise's room so she could call him collect every night. In the spring of 1981, Louise and Nellie moved into the guest wing of Bogdanovich's LA house. When she came for a visit a few months later, Louise's friend Julie was impressed by their new life. Louise and her mother both had new wardrobes and a private tap dancing teacher. Bogdanovich had put Louise in private school and arranged surgery to correct her protruding jaw, a defect caused by feeding difficulties shortly after her premature birth. Oh, I didn't know she was a preemie. They finally had to break it and wire it shut for a while, says Julie, but you could really see the difference. Yeah, my uncle, he had that same kind of jaw thing. They did the whole breaking it in half and the whole 9 yards. I love this picture too. Whole family. Dorothy, Louise, Nellie, and John. I think while she was at it, she had the shape of her nose changed too. You can see the snapshots I took of us over the years, and she has a new nose now. A lot more like Dorothy's. Bogdanovich, Julie recalls, spent most of his time at work on his book in Dorothy's old room amid her untouched collection of unicorns. When the kids, Julie and Louise, and his daughters, Sashi and Tony, crashed in on him, recalls Julie, he was pretty good about it, like a nice uncle. Sometimes he'd come out, but most of the time you'd have to take someone shopping or out to a movie or to get ice cream. He'd have to get someone to take us to a shopping or to a movie or ice cream. Louise and her mother stayed on for the year, during which time Louise wrote girlish letters home on stationery decorated with rainbows and unicorns about clothes and her Vancouver boyfriends. After mother and daughter returned to Canada in 1982, however, Bogdanovich was still very much in the picture. For most summer vacations and holidays, Louise traveled to Los Angeles, sometimes accompanied by her mother, sometimes not. Peter showered her with presents, said Julie. She had all kinds of gold chains and all these rings. She had 2 rings on each finger. Boy, this doesn't sound at all like predatory grooming of a child, does it? By 1984, when Louise was 16 and Bogdanovich had published his memoir, The Killing of the Unicorn, people were beginning to talk. I know you know that Dorothy Stratten was the 1980 playmate, whose lover was Peter Bogdanovich, wrote New York Post columnist Cindy Adams. What you might not know is that Dorothy has a sister, Louise. What you for sure don't know is Louise's new beau is Peter Bogdanovich. Louise is a teenager. Okay, why are we calling it a beau? I know that we're better about this nowadays. Hooray, that the world is always getting better. But, okay, it's not a beau. If you're underage, you don't have a boyfriend who's 60 or however old this guy is at this point. So gross. On April 1st, 1985, Hugh Hefner, stung by charges in Bogdanovich's book that his magazine's treatment of Stratten contributed to her death, made a more pointed claim. There was a pursuit of Dorothy's entire family in the months and years after her death, he said at a press conference. Pursuit of the mother and the husband claiming adultery, followed by the seduction of the little sister. As a pathological replacement of Dorothy that has continued from that time on till the present. 1 week later, Louise Stratten and her mother brought a $5 million slander against Hefner. 5 months later, they dropped the charges. The depositions taken in the case have never been made public, but Keith Morgan, a reporter from the Vancouver province who also tried for several months to uncover the truth about Bogdanovich's relationship with Louise, says that while there was a lot of innuendo, no one I talked to actually saw anything above a kiss and a cuddle. Yeah, you think he was fucking her in the living room in front of his guests? Like, oh my God. In 1987, Louise made her film debut in Bogdanovich's Illegally Yours. That's a nice name. She took a new stage name for the occasion, L.B. Stratten. Did you know that Peter liked to call Dorothy Dr. Stratten? Of course, DRS are much better initials for a person than LBS, but sure, we'll just overlook that little weird detail. Also that she takes on the last name Stratten. Her last name now is legally changed to Stratten to make her more like Dorothy. Just like her nose is now more like Dorothy, and everything is suddenly more and more just like Dorothy. Just like when he was dating Dorothy, he was molding her into Sybil Shepherd. He's pathological. I hate this guy. Anyway, it's all my opinions. This is all legend. This is all what I'm reading in People magazine, a gossip rag. What the fuck do we know? Nothing. Okay. No family members were invited when Peter Bogdanovich, who is now working on Texasville, a sequel to The Last Picture Show, quietly married the new star of his life at the Wedgwood Hotel in Vancouver on December 30th. We were shocked, said one relative of the bride. However, looking back, Peter was so in love with Dorothy that the only person he ever associated with was her little baby sister. He has never been able to let go of the feeling. Perhaps he's trying to recapture what he had with her. You think? When Louise left Peter in LA for a trip home 2 weeks after the wedding, cynics leaped to the conclusion that the marriage had only been a convenient solution to her immigration problems and was already over. In fact, insiders say, she had gone home to try to reconcile her mother to her new life. Bogdanovich's ex-wife, Polly Platt, for one, has no doubt that Peter and Louise are very much a love match. I like Louise very much, she said. She's a lovely person, and she's very close to my children. Even in age. I added that part. She's very young, yes, but she's genuine. All of this is so difficult to explain. She's a victim in all this, not a perpetrator in any way. We were all victims of the murder. But I feel good about this. I told Peter a long time ago, you should marry Louise. She certainly loves him very much. She looks at him the way, I guess, all men dream of being looked at. It's better for her this way. Who can whisper when there's a ring on your finger? Yeah, that reminds me of Bible verses that say, oh yeah, if a girl gets raped, then the guy, you just have to marry her, and then everything's fine. That's so lovely. That's so lovely. What lovely, lovely people. Oh wait, I don't think I showed you the last pictures on that one, did I? Whoops. So actually a pretty cute little picture of Louise that I like a lot. It's hard to get pictures of Louise, especially just by yourself. All right, so that was all the tea for today. Wasn't that exciting? So with those last two articles, those really kind of illustrate my huge deal with Peter Bogdanovich and why I don't find him to be a reliable narrator or a very trustworthy character in general. But it's a very interesting story, and it's an ongoing story, and once you think the story's over and you've heard it, it's not over, and there's more yet to come. So we'll get more into that in our next episode, I suppose, of Starlets and Harlots. So until then, I'm like Mr. Rogers. What? Oh no, I'm knocking things over. Have a good one, friends and neighbors. Don't do anything I wouldn't do. I'll catch you on the flip side.